Okay, we're going to get started now. My name is Valerie Smith. I will be taking you through the class today. Just a few things as we get started. I'm going to keep you guys on mute for most of the class. If you have a question, you'll notice there's a button on your screen that says raise your hand. You can do that, and I will try to unmute you so you could ask your question. I will stop a few times during the class to ask if there are questions, and if you do have a question at that point in time, please raise your hand, and I will unmute you so you can ask your question. So what we're going to be talking about today is Google Slides. If you're not familiar with Google Slides, it is basically Google's equivalent of PowerPoint. So it's presentation software. You use it to create slides that you would show during a presentation. So these can have like text and pictures, graphs, all this kind of stuff on them. Okay, so we're going to get started. And I'm going to start with a little bit in general piece of advice about not just Google Slides, it also applies to PowerPoint as well. And that is this. So this is an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. It says, I want my professors to stop reading PowerPoint slides and other student complaints. And this is essentially the big problem with PowerPoint, or for that matter, Google Slides. So it's not a question of technology. It's a question of thinking about your presentation and what you want to do with it. So it's very easy when you're working on a presentation to start typing down on your slides everything you want to say. That is not an effective way to use either PowerPoint or Google Slides because you're just reading the slides and your audience is not paying any attention to what you're saying. So I'm going to show you a little trick when we get started Google Slides that'll make it easier for you to not do that. Let's get over to Google Slides now and see how that works. Okay, so here we are on the main screen for Google Slides. To reach it, you would just go to slides.google.com. And up here at the top, you have where you can start a new presentation. You can pick from a variety of templates in that presentation. And down here, you have the presentations you've already created. And if you wanted to work on one of them, you would just click on them down there. So we're going to start with a new blank presentation. Okay, so up at the top here on the left, you have where you would name your presentation. I'm going to do that right now. Ours is going to be called Operation Skyhook. Okay, and then here on the left-hand side, you will see all the slides in your presentation. Over here on the right-hand slide, you'll see what you'll see here depends a little bit on what you're doing, but right now we're seeing different themes that are available for our presentation. I'm just going to scroll down the list a little bit so you can see that. And themes focus on giving you a background, colors, fonts, different layouts for your slides. You'll find all those contained within your theme. I suggest you pick a theme at the beginning of your presentation and stick with it throughout as you're creating it. But you can change if you want to halfway through. I usually don't recommend it because it can create problems, but you can change it if you decide halfway through you just don't like it. So you got a few slides themes here. You can import themes from other sources if you want to. We're not going to talk too much about that. But we do have a selection here. Your selections you're going to find in slides are somewhat more limited than you would find in PowerPoint. I actually think that's a feature because I think PowerPoint has a few too many options available to you. But this is where you would go to find your theme. So I'm going to put a theme on the slide here. I'm going to be using the simple dark theme for my presentation. And then I'm just going to close this window so I can see more. Okay, now on to how you keep yourself from writing everything you want to say on your slides. And that is this little section down here called the speaker notes. And what this is simply space where you can type in what you want to say in your presentation. And then when you're actually giving your presentation, depending on what your setup is, you can actually have it set up so you will see your notes and your slide, but your audience will not see your notes. So you can put down there whatever you want to say, and then think about what if that text do you think needs to be on the slide? And what kind of slides would best illustrate what you want to say? Because I think the best way to use Google Slides is to illustrate what you're going to say. So I like to have slides that have pictures, charts, graphs, that kind of stuff. less of the whole list of bullet point text. I just don't think that's a particularly effective way to use this. Okay, so let's get started on our presentation we're going to be creating today. We're going to be creating the briefing slides for the attack on the Death Star in the first Star Wars movie, and that is going to be called Operation Skyhook. Now, when you put text on slides and presentations, it is always contained in what's called a text box. This slide layout we have here starts with two text boxes here. You see it says click to add subtitle down here, and it said click to add title there. These text boxes will automatically adjust the size of the font to fit within the space on the slide. So you don't even have to change the font size if you don't want to. To add text to your box, simply click on it and type in what you want to say. That's simple. Okay, so we have this text box here, and you'll notice the fonts are in two different colors. So you got this white up here, and then you have a sort of gray down here. Let's say we decided we didn't like the font color for our second line. We want to change it to something else. Like you would in a Word document or really any other sort of document, in order to do something like change the color of text, you select it first. So I'm just going to select the text right here, and then I'm going to go up here to your font color option. So I'm going to click here, and this is going to give me all the different colors that are available. Notice down here you have theme colors, and these are created as part of the theme that went with your slide background and all that stuff. And these colors are generally set so that they'll match each other and match well with the background. But you don't have to use a theme color. You can use any other color that's created in this pantheon, or you could go in and get your own custom color. I'm going to stick with the theme color, and I'm going to change this text to that green right here. Okay. And now that text has changed color. And our first slide is done. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so we're going to move on to create our second slide. So when you go to put a slide in, you'll pick a layout for your slide. And over here on the left-hand side, this is the new slide button. And if you click here, it'll just put in a new slide with the previous layout. If you click down here, you'll be able to select your slide layout. And your layout is things like how many text boxes are on the page, how many spaces are there. Remember, you don't have to have a certain layout. You can always choose a blank layout and just put whatever you want on the slide, and we will be doing that later on in the class. But for right now, for the next slide we're going to use the section header slide layout type. So I'm just going to click onto here, and then I'm going to put in the text for this slide, which is "May the Force be with you." And now the other slide is done. Now notice over here on our left-hand slide in the slide sorter, we now have two different slides. Okay. So the next slide we're going to do is we're going to be adding a slide that is a combination of pictures and text. And we're going to start with a one-column text slide for this. So I'm going to click on here to the new slide with layout and pick a one-column text slide right here. So right now we're starting out, we have two text boxes on our slide right now. And we're going to put some text in these boxes first. And the title for this slide is going to be our target. And then underneath here, we're going to put a short bulleted list of 2 items. Now, this is one of these places where slides differs from PowerPoint. In a text box like this in PowerPoint, it would default to having bulleted list. In slides, you have to start a bulleted list in there. So I'm going to do that right now using the bulleted list option over here. And it is, oops. And my second item on my list is hit trigger. Okay, so now we have the 2 items on our list. Unfortunately, that font is very, very small. And this is actually something you should really think about while you're working in slides, is you're going to be presenting this somewhere. And if depending on the size of the room, the size of the screen, you have to think about how big to make your text so that your audience can actually read it. And this is just too small. So I'm going to enlarge this. I'm going to select the text again, much like I did with the color. And then I'm going to use the increase font size here till I get it something like that. Now it's sort of at the text size I'd like, but it's looking very strange in the box. It's too cramped over to the side. So I'm actually going to make the box a little bit bigger by just clicking and dragging here. So it goes out about to the middle of the slide. And that looks a little bit better. Okay, I'm actually going to make the title bigger too. There we go. Okay, so now we have the text on the slide like we want it. And now we want to add a picture. So we're going to go to Insert up here, and then we're going to go to Image. Oops. Now you have a couple of different options here. You can upload an image from your computer. You can search the web. If you have a camera and you want to take the picture, you can take it by that, or you have a URL from somewhere out on the web, you could use that. But we're going to focus on two options, which is going to right now from our Google account. So we have the options of taking a picture from Google Drive, or we have the option of taking one from Google Photo. I'm going to go to the Google Drive option. And then I'm going to go here, and we're going to browse for the picture, much like you would on a computer. So, okay, so there's the images. We want the exhaust port image, so I'm going to pick that one right there. And then I'm just going to click Insert here, and it drops the picture onto my slide. I can then reposition the picture by clicking and dragging. Drag it down a little. And let's say if I want to make this larger or smaller, I could do that by clicking and dragging on the little circles, on the little squares that surround the picture. Okay, so does anyone have any questions on that? Okay, so moving on, we're now going to create a new slide that has two pictures and some text boxes on it. So we're going to start here with a title and two column slide layout right here. So you're going to put the title in here. And then we're going to be putting in some text here. Okay, so now we have the title and two pieces of text on this page. I want to put some pictures in here, but before I do that, I'm actually going to make these text boxes smaller. You can just drop a picture on top of a text box, but I think when you start layering items on top of each other, it can get difficult to click on one or the other. So I prefer to keep them a little bit more discreet. So I'm going to make this text box much smaller. Go. And this one as well. There we go. Okay, so now we have the text on our slide. It's time to add the pictures. And we're going to be adding two different pictures to this slide. First one, like before, is going to come from our drive. And that would be the Princess Leia picture. It's going to go right there. And that picture is a little too big because we don't want it to take over more than half the slide. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. There we go. And now we have another picture we need to add. But this one, instead of inserting it from my drive, I'm going to go search the web for it. So I'm going to put my search terms in here. And hopefully the picture I want will come up. Okay, and now again, I'm going to resize this a little bit. Oops, it's moving. Okay. And over a little bit. Okay. So now I have the slide with the text and the two pictures in place. I think I do need to make this font a bit bigger. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, make it bold as well. It's 21. Okay. So now we have this slide set. Okay. So before we move on to our next slide, I just want to ask if there are any questions, because the next slide is going to be our really more complicated one. Okay, Linda, what's your question? You may have to unmute yourself before you talk.
That makes sense. Sorry about that. When you insert the image, where do you place your cursor in the text box where you want the image to go? I kind of missed that when you're inserting the image. Where does your cursor go?
You really don't have a cursor for this part of it. You just it'll just sort of drop the picture on the slide and you just sort of drag it to where you want it to go. We're going to do a slide shortly that has 3 pictures on it, and I think you'll see it a little bit more clearly how it works there.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and this is going to be a chart slide. And we're going to start here with a slide, title and body slide, I believe. Might be title only, actually. Yeah, I think we are using a title only here. And then we're going to put in our title, which is Firepower. And now we're going to insert our chart. So we're going to go to Insert, and we're going to go to Chart. And here you see you have these options of the kind of chart you want to create. So it could be a bar, a column, a line, or pie. Or if you already created your chart, you could go straight to Google Sheets and insert it from there. We're going to be creating our chart, and we're going to be doing a column chart. So I'm going to click on Column here. And it's putting the chart into the slide. Now, this chart has nothing to do with what we our presentation right now. You'll notice it says points scored, and it's period 1 and 2 and these 4 teams. This has nothing to do with it. This is just a dummy chart to start with. We need to now go and edit this chart to match what we want to put in. And you don't edit or create a chart within Google Slides. It's actually done within Google Sheets. Someone unmuted. I'm hearing some noise. Anyway, so we're going to go here to go to Open Source so we can work on our chart here. So now we're opening up in Google Sheets. Could everyone check to make sure you're muted, because I'm hearing sound from someone, and everyone looks like they're muted on my side. Okay. Okay, so here we have our chart in Google Sheets. And we have the data over here for the chart. We need to change this data to match what we're going to be doing with our chart. And we're only going to have 2 items here, so we're going to delete these 2 rows entirely. And actually, I think we do 3 rows. And we're going to get rid of one of the columns as well, because we're doing a very simple chart here. Okay, so now we have the basics of what our chart's going to look like, we're now going to fill in the information that we need here. Start with, we're going to put firepower. It's going to go there. And instead of team 1, we're going to have battle station. And instead of team 2, we will have Imperial Fleet. And the numbers we're going to change here. This is going to be a 5, and this is going to be a 2.5. And now we look at our chart, and it's somewhat different here. We've got battle station down here. We have Imperial Fleet here. We still got points scored up here, unfortunately. So we're going to do something about that. We're going to click on the chart, click on these 3 dots, and go to Edit Chart. And over here is where we're going to do some more customization and chart and access tiles. The chart title is what we're going to want to change from points scored. We're going to change this over to firepower. Nope, didn't spell that right. Okay. I'm also going to see if I can change the positioning of this as well. Right now it's on the left-hand side, and I'm going to move it over so it's centered. Okay, so we'll close that. Our chart has all been all done. We can now close out of that. And this should, now you notice here we still have our old chart here, but now there's a button here that says update. And when we click on that, slides goes back to that sheet, looks at our chart, and makes any changes that we made. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to position this a little bit differently. I think it should be centered. Oops. You'll notice sometimes as you're dragging items, you'll see things like red lines or blue lines come in. That's to allow you to position things. So when that red line was showing up, it was showing when I had the chart centered on the slide. So you'll see those to help you position things. So any questions on creating a chart in slides? Okay. So moving on to our next slide. This time, we're going to be creating a slide that does not have a layout. So we're going to start with a blank slide. And this is simply because Google Slides does not provide a kind of layout that's going to work for what I want this slide to look like. So this slide is going to have 3 different pictures on it. And we're going to start by inserting those pictures. I'm going to go to Insert Images. And these, again, are going to be coming out of my Google Drive. And that's the fighters, torpedoes, and the trench. So notice here I was able to select 3 pictures at once to insert. And then I'm going to click on Insert. And it drops my pictures onto the slide. Now you'll notice that they're not the same size. Oops. And we're going to just move them around individually. And you notice here you can move them off your slide, and that's just if you need more room on your screen to do something. And I'm going to actually make my notes section a little bit smaller for this part of the class, just so we can see a little bit better. Okay, so we got 3 pictures here, and we want to position them all on the slides. Now we have to do something about the sizes of these pictures, and in one case, the shape of the picture as well. So we'll start with, let's say we want the pictures to more or less match the size of this picture of the fighters. So I'm just going to resize this one. You'll notice those blue lines that's telling you when their sizes are matching, at least on the vertical axis. And this is they're a little different in aspect ratio. So they're not going to match exactly, but they're at least close now. And now we're going to be working with this picture as well. And we're going to slide that up. Oops. It's a little bit smaller. Now you notice these pictures are different shapes. So these are like more rectangles, and this is a longer rectangle. So I'm going to actually crop this picture so it's closer in match to that shape there. And cropping is different than resizing because when you crop a picture, you're actually cutting away picture from the outside. So when you're resizing it, you're just making it bigger or smaller. You're not actually cutting parts of the picture off. So that's what right now I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some parts of the picture off. Okay. So that matches in size a little bit better than the old picture. Now I'm going to position them as I want them on the slide. So 3 in the row. Oops. Okay, so now we have our 3 pictures on our slide. Now we're going to add the text we want on this slide. So to do that, we'll need to insert text boxes because this basic slide layout didn't come with any. So I'm going to go to Insert to Text Box. And once you do that, you just sort of draw the size of the box you want on your slide. And then you can type text into that box. And this one, title is going to be Our Plan. Except you don't really see that text, do you? So you'll notice here, you might be able to see it. What the problem is when we draw the text box, it went back to the default font settings rather than the theme settings. So we need to get the theme settings over onto this particular text box. But instead of having to, go and look and see what the font and color is, we're going to go back to one of the slides and we're just going to click in the text box. We're going to go here to something which is the Paint Format button. And what this essentially is a way to copy and paste formatting. So normally you'd copy and paste text from one source to another. This copy and paste formatting, so font size, font color, all that kind of stuff, you could do using this button. So right now this is the text we want to copy the formatting from. So we're just going to click on the Paint Format option, go back to our other slide, and click on our text. And you notice here it changed right into that. And we're just going to do the Paint Format again. Oops, sorry, this is a little confusing. Be a little bit tricky because you have to click and drag. And now we have it all matched. The thing with the Paint Format is once you click on it once, you can only use it once and you have to go back and copy again. So it's not like regular copying and pasting where you copy something or cut something and you can paste it again and again. When you're using a format painter, you have to recopy the format before each time you use it on different pieces of text. Okay, so we're going to add 3 more text boxes to this slide above each of the pictures. And okay, and again, you see we're having the same problem with the text not matching. So this time we're going to go back to another slide. And again, we're going to be using the Paint Format option. So I'm going to copy it from here, go back to this slide. And then again, just apply it to each text box. Oops. Okay, so on this slide, we're having a little problem because it's going down to a second line and we don't want that. So we're just going to adjust the text box size a little so it fits. Now we really do need to move some things around in this slide to get it to where we want it to be. So I'm just going to move this up Move it up again here till they line up with each other. So again, you see that red line going to the center, showing that they're all lined up with each other. And then just move the pictures up as well. Yeah. Okay, so now we have this slide all set. Does anyone have any questions on this? Okay, so this is we actually now have all the slides in our presentation done. We're going to now go into some fine tuning and adding some more effects to our different slides. And we're going to start with animations. And this slide right here is where we're going to add our animations. Now, I am not a huge fan of animations. I think they're distracting. And I think some of it is just because I was, unfortunately, in grad school, right at the beginning of the dawn of PowerPoint, when everyone had every piece of text, picture, and what have you on their slides flying in from 6 different directions. It was very annoying. So I think if you're going to use animations, which is when different pieces of text or pictures come into the slide in different ways, you should use them sparingly. I think they're useful if for some reason you want to keep a certain picture or piece of text off the slide when you start talking. But other than that, I don't think there's many good reasons to use them. But I am going to go into how you do use them. Okay. So when you want to animate an object, the first thing you do is click on it. Then you're going to go to Insert, and in this list, you're going to find Animations. And over here is the options you have. Now, the first part, slide transition, which we'll go over in a few minutes. But then you have object animations. And so right now we have this one object that's selected. And now we want to add an animation to it. So I'm going to click down on this drop down. This is some of the different options you have: fly in, fly out, all sorts of stuff. It's not as bad as the PowerPoint list of animations. Like I said, I don't like to use very complicated ones, but we are going to use here, we're going to use the fly in from bottom animation on this one. So I'm going to click there. And let's say we want to take a look and see how that works. I'm just going to click play here. There's the slide, click again, and that's your animation. And you can change the speed too if you wanted to go slower or faster. Okay. We're going to add the same animation to this picture as well. So I'm going to click here, click on Add Animation, and then on this one again, it's going to fly in from bottom. Let's take a look at how the slide looks now. So when you first go to this slide, this is what you're going to see on the screen. You would then click your mouse, and the first picture would come up. Click your mouse again, and the second picture would come up. So that's how you would do an animation. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan of these and think you should use them sparingly, but that's how you would add them if you wanted to. So I'm going to click on Stop Now, and we're done with the animations. And we're going to move on now. So before I move on to the next part, does anyone have any questions on animations? Okay, so now we have all our slides done. We're now going to put them in the proper order because I did not create these slides in anywhere near the order I wanted them to be. And to do that, we're going to switch our views to the slide sorter by clicking down here. And so this is so we can see all our slides at one time. And this way we can reorder our slides into the order we desire. So we're going to start here with this slide, which is going to go to the end of the presentation. Oops, a little bit further. And you just sort of click and drag them around till you get them in the slide the way you want. I want to put this slide into second position and this slide into here. And now I have my slides in the order that I want. So now that we have the slides in the correct order, I'm going to see about adding some transitions between slides. And transitions are basically a fancy way to get from one slide to another. I'm less annoyed by transitions than I am by animations, just because I think it's less cluttering. And going from one slide to another, making it a little fancy, I think works. So we're going to start with our first slide. We're going to click on that, and we're going to click on change transition. And there's a couple different options here. Oops. So we're going to click on the drop down. So you have dissolve, fade, slide from right, slide from left. Those are pretty obvious. Then you have some interesting ones here, the flip, the cube, or the gallery options. Let's take a look at the gallery and see what that looks like. And in fact, we're going to actually apply this gallery transition to all the slides. Okay, so we've just put the gallery transition on all the slides. Let's take a look at how that looks like. So I'm just going to click here on the Start Presentation button so we can take a look. So that is our first slide. I'm going to click there, go to the next one. And this is our animation slide. So we click again and again to trigger our animations. This is our comparative firepower slide. This is our target. That's one more slide. And then our last slide, and we're done. And we can then exit the presentation. It doesn't really give you a way to preview your slides before without going into the presentation mode, but it's still, I think, in this case, I'd like with the fancier ones to keep the transition the same throughout the entire presentation. Having a different transition on each slide looks a little silly. So my suggestion is pick a transition and just apply it to all your slides. Okay. Okay. So any questions now before we can just talk a little bit about printing? Okay. So printing your slides, it's not really that complicated. I'm just going to click on the print option here. And this is what you're going to see here is you have one slide per page. So that's the typical default printing option. If you want to print something different, you actually have to go up here to the File option and then go to Print Settings and Preview. And this is where you can change how your slides print out. So right now it's one slide without notes. You could go to this drop down here and you could do slides with notes, or you could add and start creating your handouts. These are very popular. The 3 slides per print, the 3 slides per page with the space for taking notes. And typically you'd also flip this over into the portrait orientation. So this is what you would do to create those handouts. So I'm in Google Chrome, so I could then send this directly to the printer. But if you're not using Google Chrome, sometimes you will have to therefore afterwards download this as a PDF and then print it out. You might not be able to print directly from your browser. Okay, so that's the simple questions. That's the end of printing. We're going to close the preview. I'm not going to actually print this out. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about presenting. So right up here, you have the present button. And if you click on the down arrow, you'll see there's other options here. So there's presenting on another screen. So, excuse me, if you had your computer connected to a different monitor or projector, you could use that option and you would see one view on your screen and your slides would be on the other screen. You also have the option here of presenter view. And this is when I was talking about notes earlier. I was mostly thinking about presenter view. And this is something you can use when you're using a separate screen for this, is you click on presenter view, and I'll show you what that looks like here. This is what you will see. So you will have this window here that's telling you the time, how long you've been speaking for, and it lets you move around your slides. So I can go back here to slide 1. And I have my notes over here. So you'll be able to look and see, you'll see your slide, you'll see the next slide in your presentation, and you'll see your notes here as to what you want to see. Meanwhile, your audience is just seeing this. So none of the notes or anything like that. That's, again, something that only works when you're using a 2-screen setup. You can't do that on one screen. And you would just click on Next to advance through your notes, and to trigger animations. So again, you could just scroll through your presentation here. I don't use this very often. There's the audience tools. That's more integrated with some of the other options, but that's if you're presenting something to an online audience where they can do some things. So we're not really going to use those, but you do have here your speaker notes. And you finish, you can go through your presentation. And when you're done, you just close that, and then you can just exit here. And I think presenter notes are really useful. The presenter view is really, really useful. One last thing about presenting. So one of the problems people usually have with presenting has nothing to do with Google Slides. And if you're using PowerPoint, it has nothing to do with PowerPoint. If you're going to be doing a presentation somewhere, you need to find out what sort of equipment they have. You need to know what sort of equipment you're bringing. So if you're bringing a laptop, you need to know what kind of display cable you need for that laptop, whether it's an HDMI or a VGA. And you can talk to the person at the place where you're presenting to find out what kind of equipment they have and if you're going to need an adapter. Ideally, if you can, go there and test things before. Certainly leave yourself plenty of time at the beginning of the presentation, just in case something doesn't work. Because a lot of times the problems are not with PowerPoint and they're not with slides, it's with basic setup with your computer. It's getting your laptop to recognize that there's another screen attached. It's stuff like that. It's not PowerPoint, it's not slides, it's something within the computer that you have to resolve. But again, yeah, as much as you can, know what equipment you're using, know what you need to present, and then talk to the person at the place where you're presenting so you can find out how to use that. All right, so that's it for the class. Does anyone have any questions? Please raise your hand. Okay, Matthew, what's your question?
Is there a link for a recording of this? I kind of joined a few minutes late.
Yeah, it'll be up on our YouTube channel.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, so thank you all for coming. Like I said, this will be available on our YouTube channel probably within a day. Oh, Matthew, you have another question?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. This, and I think there was a couple others that I missed. When do you think they'll be available?
Some of them are already up. One of them I'm ashamed to admit I forgot to hit record on, so that won't be there. But they'll all be, what we have will be on our YouTube channel probably within a day or two.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, that's going to be it for today. Like I said, it'll be up and available for you within a few days. Thank you.